and welcome to LawWiser, India's first video-only knowledge-sharing platform on law and policy. As part of our campaign on EV, we are discussing some very interesting points which revolve around the EV sector or the electric vehicle, which is fast emerging and growing in India. We all know as consumers, we are getting far more aware about clean energy and green resources and switching to cleaner options. And electric vehicle is one of those, potential options that consumers are looking at. However, the industry is still developing and there are many policy changes that are happening, and it requires a lot of boost to be, developed and come at par with the other automobile options that are available. To discuss today all about its policy and to explore the electric mobility route in India, we have a fantastic panel today with us. We have first with us Ashpreet Sethi. She is Head of Policy Affairs at EVage Ventures Private Limited. We have with us Dipti Lavya Swain. He is founder and managing partner at DLS Offices. And joining him, we have Ntasha. She's co-founder and managing partner at Ankurit Capital. Welcome, Ashpreet, Ntasha, and Dipti. Thank you for taking time out for us.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
To begin with, we would want to first understand by taking our audience a little in the background as to what were the biggest changes that have happened in the past 10 years in the electric vehicle or the EV landscape, and if you can also along with it highlight some recent trends and development that would just give some insight to our audience. Ntasha, would you like to go first there?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for having me as a panelist and talking about this. So just a quick introduction. I am from Ankurit Capital. We're an early stage VC fund, which is focused on investing in technologies, in disruptive technologies. And one of the key focus for our investment thesis is sustainability. And we're very bullish on sustainable mobility per se and the opportunities around it. And this is really interesting, interesting conversation which you bring forth in terms of the maturity of EV landscape, though I would still say India is at a nascent stage of EV, but there's a huge opportunity given that we're one of the largest two-wheeler market and it's a huge consumer story. There's a huge market for disruption which is yet to happen, because as everyone knows, the penetration of EV per se is less than 1% in India right now. So that's the opportunity which we're seeing for transformation to happen in EV landscape. And it's very important for India as a country which is largely import dependent on petroleum and petroleum products, oil specifically, to move to sustainability and to be able to fulfill its own energy demands in a sustainable fashion. One of the easiest way for that to do is electrification of our vehicle, which not only adds to a climate change ecosystem and adds points to us from that perspective, but it's beneficial, which we see as we're seeing in the current cost environment with the rising prices of oil. It becomes very imperative for users. And as we have seen, the parity of oil prices being at par with, the government has removed the subsidies for consumers in terms of fuel subsidies. So there's an even more greater opportunity and incentive for consumers to move to electric vehicle. And now when you talk about how this ecosystem has evolved per se, so I think one of the key things, EV is primarily almost 40% of EV is just the battery, right? So the evolution which we have seen in the battery technology and how it's shaped up over the past decade. So lithium ion battery prices have fallen by 93% over the past 3 decades. And almost 90% of the deduction has happened over the last decade or so. So that's the sort of opportunity which we are seeing in terms of price of lithium ion battery falling down, which contributes almost like I was saying earlier, 40% of the price of EV. One of the things about electric vehicle is the high upfront cost, because the fuel cost is not that significant as we see for an IC. So when this price goes down, it becomes very attractive for consumers to look at it as an option to use on a daily basis. But I think at the same time, the other challenge around EV is around the infrastructure which we are seeing. While lithium lithium ion prices have fallen down. We have seen even maturity happen in the charging infrastructure, right? Earlier, a vehicle which used to take 8 to 10 hours to do a full charge now can happen in around 3 to 4 hours, and with certain evolved battery solution technologies, we're seeing fast charge happen at almost half an hour. So that's the sort of maturity and evolution which we have seen in the EV landscape, which has been a big conduit for the escalation and the adoption of this EV ecosystem. On the other side of it, when I talk about the battery infrastructure, which is yet to evolve in India, like in India, I think we have around 18,000 battery charging station, right? Which is minuscule compared to the need which is there right now in terms of the 1.8% EV penetration already existing on the roads. But even to accommodate, let's say 30-40% of that, 30% of that transformation happening from a normal vehicle to an EV vehicle. So there's a huge amount of opportunity which needs to happen in terms of supporting this infrastructure. And one of the key things which the government has highlighted is towards the battery swapping technology, battery swapping station. And I think I'd like my colleagues to add a bit more on these fronts and really set this conversation going, if they would like to add some views to this.
I think India's journey in electric vehicles started way back in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, when the National Electric Mission started. And while, of course, it has taken substantial amount of time, and we are already in 2022, but there were a lot of hindrances. Some other countries like China perhaps went ahead of us. So did the US. But I think India right now is at the cusp of becoming world's largest EV player. Not just in the number of vehicles being deployed, but also in terms of manufacturing and export of electric vehicles. And mind you, I can tell that a lot of EV manufacturers have actually shown interest in manufacturing in India. And these are all international players, okay? And it's not just domestic players, but international players showing interest because of things like, say we had FAME 1, we had a lot of issues in FAME 1. This is way back in 2015. And then we got our FAME 2 recently, and the market really lauded the changes that were brought into FAME 2 that really helped that move from the government. In fact, I was helping on some of the aspects, of FAME 2 vis-a-vis, what has to become coming out and what has the market done, the implications, and some of the comments also on FAME 2. And this has really changed the landscape, is what I will believe, since NEMP and until now. Right now, of course, the last 2-3 years, in my personal view, we could have been standing at a much better position globally. But thanks to COVID, I guess we got delayed by 2-3 years. But hey, we are here right now. And I think most of the EV players until now have kind of committed to the minister or the ministry of road and transport that they will actually cut down on their petrol and diesel vehicles manufacturing, and they will completely switch to EV. And Ntasha did rightly mention that the market penetration is actually less than 2%. And we are one of the largest two-wheeler players, but there is a huge amount of scope for EV, E3 wheelers, and there are manufacturers who are now also getting into high-end technology-based EV buses as well as trucks. So, so this is also a great, change or switch that we will see. In fact, not to name anybody, but I'm helping some people raise funding in those manufacturing entities, and this only showcases that there is enough interest in people. I'm guessing Sania has more questions for me and Ashpreet later on, where I will address some of the other points. But I think in terms of the last 10 years, I believe substantial amount of work has been done. And this year combined with the next, will really see that there is a huge transformation of people adopting EVs as their preferred choice because of varying factors like charging infrastructure, bettering the subsidies that the government has already announced in terms of buying of EVs, some relaxations that we saw from the ministry on adopting and compliances relating to EVs, and lots of aspects like petrol pumps and other housing bodies also being instructed to actually build in their model building plans aspects where the bylaws will actually require the builders to pre-install charging stations. Some of the authorities in NCR, Delhi NCR, for example, Greater Noida has already adopted this in their bylaws. So I think these are some of the steps which will help people remove their so-called charging or battery fear, mileage fear, and slowly we will see that we are actually moving to a better scenario than where we are standing now. EV, yes, they're still highly priced, despite, yes, Natasha, the price of lithium ion, substantially going down in the last 2 or 3 decades. But I guess for a country like India, it still needs to come down, and I believe it shall. There are new age technologies
Yeah, I think the
that are coming
premium
in.
for EV is around 20% for two-wheelers, then IC, and almost 50% for four-wheelers. So four-wheelers seems like a faraway dream right now, but I think the first adoption you see would be happening in the public transportation, and then of course the two-wheelers is very attractive, as we're already seeing with Ola, Ather, and Revolt coming on in a big way.
I agree absolutely on the B2C segment. And also, like you rightly mentioned, we have a huge logistics market, the last mile delivery market. And that's where, again, two-wheelers and some three-wheelers come in. And that will be so one of the focuses of the government.
Very well said, Dipti. In fact, highlighting on the schemes as well, which have played a popular role in, kind of uh, giving boost to the EV sector. That just also takes us through the next part of it, while there have been schemes that have been coming up, and, there are a lot of changes that are happening. We would also want to understand the need for, uniformity when it comes to different state policies now, because every state is evolving and their own separate policies on EVs. There are certain issues that are faced when it comes to the implementation of those policies. So, Ashpreet, you have that background and you would be able to just explain to us, I'm trying to understand what is the need for the uniformity, the issues that are faced, and also, understanding the measures that can be taken for ensuring an effective implementation of these policies.
Sure, great. Thanks for the question. So if I may just add, Sania, to what Ntasha and Dipti have already covered earlier. Yes, the last mile delivery and intercity, that segment has huge potential in terms of electrification. Unfortunately, coming back to your question, just relating it to the first one, none of the state policies except one has given that kind of push to the adoption that is required for commercial electric four-wheelers. So everybody talks about electric two-wheelers, electric three-wheelers, capturing the last mile delivery segment, but I think the industry, the government, and the funding community needs to recognize the fact that four-wheeler commercial electric vehicles will be the way forward in terms of ensuring that the whole approach in a holistic manner in which all the entire transport segment can be made emission free. Electrifying that is extremely important. So that's the first point about how state EV policies need to include commercial electric four-wheelers. Understandable why they weren't included earlier. In fact, I was working with RMI and we had this discussion earlier as well, that I have been party to a lot of states writing the policies, but this is something that has been a missing link for the industry. The second most important point is that while states are giving the fiscal incentives, it's not really reaching the industry on time. It leads to a lot of capital block, especially for startups, which are still finding their way in the ecosystem. Kudos to the government for coming out with schemes like FAME, PLI. Unfortunately, startups do not fit under most of the criteria that is there in, under these schemes. So we need that additional push from states in terms of ensuring that these fiscal incentives reach startups, in fact, the entire OEM community on time. I have been speaking to the larger players as well. They say that the incentives do not come through for years together. So that is a big issue. And the third most important thing is that states need to push for a lower GST before the GST Council. We all know that the GST Council takes a call. It's not up to the finance minister or any other department, where the GST rate on purchase of raw materials needs to be brought down from 24% to at least a lower bracket. When we are selling a product, it's 5%. So imagine the capital block that is done in terms of while we are purchasing and then we are selling. The state does not reimburse. Most of the states are taking a call that they will not reimburse the GST component, the state component, till the vehicles are not sold in the state. Now, the market is not that big for OEMs to sell only in specific states where they've established. And just the last point, states need to identify highway charging infrastructure as a crucial component for higher adoption of mass, which would include public transport, which Ntasha referred to, and commercial electric vehicles, which Dipti referred to. So we need that kind of push from the entire state ecosystem.
Great. Very well put, Ashpreet. Thank you for actually, highlighting those critical points in terms of, especially the last one as well. One of the biggest challenges as consumers, even I feel, is if I'm going to take a vehicle, will I be able to pull through the, highway route or not? You would have to, step out of the highway and then find a charging facility or carry something with you to be able to. So of course, four-wheelers is like facing a challenge, and that segment needs to be addressed as well. Anything to add here, Ntasha and Dipti?
Yes, I would like to chip in
Sure.
here. It is good to hear out the points that Ashpreet mentioned, and I agree with some of the points, and I think some of the aspects I have a feeling that the government believes are not going so wrong. But Ashpreet, thank you for highlighting that. I help Niti Aayog and MORTH. And I think I'm going to take that up in terms of building some suggestions, especially on the time that is taking for all of these subsidies to actually reach the end user. And I must explain to everybody here that the way these guidelines are currently featured, the subsidy is kind of inbuilt, and the end user, the individual customer, they get the benefit. And yes, the subsidies have to then be applied by the manufacturer or the seller of the vehicle, and perhaps that's where you're saying that it is taking time. I understand, because there are certain checklist items and tick the boxes which needs to be complied with. So that is going to happen. And on the point that Sania, you mentioned, I want to add that the government is actually working on a lot of front. I'm obviously not a representative of the government here, but I'm just talking about some of the positives that are taking place in India. So I'm in that sense advocating the EVs for India. And there are our charging infrastructure guidelines which had come up, and over the last 2-3 years, including earlier this year on January 14, we saw more changes. I think there were some relaxations that came in. Yes, there were certain issues in terms of the flexibility to be extended to further more players, but some of the key obstructions were indeed removed. For example, licensing requirements for a PCS, public charging systems. Some of the subsidies for the entire charging stations were removed. So that it is facilitated and people can open up more and more PCS. There has been advisory going to a lot of these fuel stations to actually open up charging stations within. So it will in that sense help because our fuel problems get resolved with these types of fuel pumps. But I do acknowledge that you can fill up your tank in 2-3 minutes versus 2-3 hours per battery, and because of that we saw recently the battery swapping policy that came out from the government. And I can tell you that initially the thought process of the government was that the battery should be prefit to EVs. And I think we have undergone a huge change until now when we are actually bringing out a policy for battery swapping. What that will basically mean is that you can open up swapping stations, and you can swap your battery. Of course, there are different business models that can be built in, just like a battery shop for regular vehicles, where you can subscribe to models, and you can go and give in your used battery and take a new battery, charged battery, and cover the remainder distance. So that will help save up on those 2-3 hours which you would otherwise take to fast charge your battery. There are other companies, I would like to mention here some companies like Log9, etc., who are actually developing batteries which are much more efficient in terms of longevity, as well as manufacturing batteries which are more efficient and can handle faster charges. There are companies like, let's say, Hero, Ether, Ola Electric, IPL Tech, which is a truck manufacturer, DSF, and so on and so forth, who are working on different models to help these types of battery or range fears. Of course, that will still take a little bit of time. It is a function of technology in that sense. We're doing a lot of work on that front as well. But yes, India is a large country, so obviously it will take some time for all of these to spread out.
Exactly. Yeah. Very well said, Dipti. Thank you for actually adding those inputs with regard to battery swapping and all the other initiatives that are being taken to cover up as to what Ashpreet was also highlighting. That just takes us to the next part of our discussion, which is basically the central government is the one that's kind of the one formulating the policies. So what's the role of center, and how does it really act as a policy powerhouse in the EV sector? And you have already highlighted some of the policies, but if you can just kind of give us an example.
So I think how policy framing for EV works in India is basically that we have a kind of a model policy which the center has come out, and we obviously have seen that every state has come up with their respective state policies, and the count keeps on increasing by the month, or perhaps sometimes by the week, where every state comes out with their own respective EV policies. How these policies work, I think they facilitate running of EVs, both at a personal consumer level versus at a business level. And there are obviously certain relaxations and subsidies that these states are also providing in their respective states. And I can also tell you that the government of India through Niti Aayog and MORTH has set up teams which are actually working with states, so that both these policies kind of handshake. I think there are still some teething problems. It will take some time to settle down, and most of the state EV policies are still in their nation stages, versus some of the advanced places. Delhi, for example, I think Delhi has been doing a lot of work in adopting EVs by bringing out notifications, relaxations, and policies to facilitate. I understand from a lot of my clients who are EV manufacturers, they do mention to me that there are issues when they have to actually deploy EVs in multiple cities in different states. That perhaps is largely because of the fact that there is some kind of opposition which they face, or friction that they face from the commercial drivers or commercial vehicles which are non-EV. And I think that is one place where Ashpreet, I think I will agree with you that the government really needs to act quickly, because that will help facilitate deploying of these vehicles. And otherwise, I think on the policy front, there are different types of explanations and notifications which are coming in at a state level as well as a central level. There are EESL and CESL like bodies which have been empowered by the ministry to actually purchase larger kind of buses, etc., and replace the old perhaps not diesel. I believe we don't really have diesel buses in at least the metro cities. They are all converted to CNG, but converting them to electric buses, so that is happening. And I am seeing that there are a lot of orders being placed by government institutions and bodies with all these EV manufacturers, and I think these are all being facilitated through policy. So that is one good front. But yes, there still are some teething problems, and there are some other states where we still need to pick up speed and ease out these policies so that we can see even faster and larger deployment of batteries.
Great. Very well said, Dipti. Ashpreet and Ntasha, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Dipti was talking about from the center's perspective. I think one of the key things which has been a good boost for the EV ecosystem is the opportunity for retailers to be able to sell electricity. That permission has been given, which is really incentivized, which incentivizes third-party users to build these charging infrastructure rather than just it being mandated, so that economics around it starts to become more attractive. So that's a good development. And another thing, barring of course the policy development and the policy support, which is very critical for I would say clean energy and EV per se, because without it, it's this industry would not have really had the opportunity. Barring that, I think the government needs to take some more initiative in terms of research and development, and sort of giving money for incubation per se, like a knowledge center per se, for critically around the battery technology, right? Because right now what we are seeing is one of the two of the most mature ecosystems in the world, which is US and China, are influencing our existing battery technology in a major way. This I'm talking about the existing startups as well, which are sort of doing in a lot of respect, without taking any names, doing a basic plug and play of these existing batteries, which not necessarily are made for or built for India, built for our temperate climate per se, don't really have that bandwidth to be able to sustain the heat of 40 degrees for 8 to 10 hours in a day, and that's why we're seeing the sort of horror stories around some of the batteries catching fire, so on and so forth. So I think if we want to catch on to this opportunity and really add to our GDP, or in terms of capturing on this $1 billion or even a trillion dollar market opportunity, rather than just doing a plug and play, or to encourage just IPR of foreign battery technology, the government needs to really motivate more IPR to be built in this battery innovation technology, which is made for India per se. And who knows, possibly this sort of technology could going forward be exported to other countries like Africa and so on and so forth, right? So I think that innovation gap is really required, and there's a lot of opportunity, like in terms of, let's say, cell chemistry around the battery technology, for which I think some of the disruptive startups wouldn't really have the bandwidth, because they would not have access to like labs per se or research per se to be able to do it, unlike some of the well-established OEMs. So that impetus need to be given to the ecosystem, because as we have seen, the EV ecosystem in the US was primarily driven by the likes of Tesla, right, which has completely disrupted the ecosystem over there, and it's become the most valuable company, leaving everyone else behind. So I think the same opportunity could take place over here, provided there's some more support from the government, from a research, primarily from a research R&D perspective, which will really, I think, give a lot of impetus to this ecosystem per se. So that's just my two
Well
bits
said.
on what I feel on the opportunity for this.
Well said.
I also wanted to highlight, interestingly, I
Yeah.
just found out there's a company called Praveg, which is based out of Bangalore. They developed a battery solution technology, which was recently acquired by a European company, right? And they apparently have a great battery charging solution, which does full charge within 30 minutes, right? So I think innovation like these needs more encouragement, and we would definitely need some more access to investments in R&D to be able to support this, and to really be world leaders in it,
True.
Yeah,
Ashpreet,
I'll just add 2 quick points. Actually, just taking what Ntasha said forward. So at EVage as well, we are not resorting to plug and play at all. We are creating our own battery packs, and we are ensuring that it's customized as per the customer's need. So I completely agree with her point, because this is the point that I was trying to make as well. The startups need R&D supports, especially in terms of financial or fiscal incentives, because whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not, startups have been the backbone of the EV ecosystem in India. It's the startups who brought the concept to India, and now the champion OEMs are getting whatever is required in terms of investment support,
Yes.
etc. And startups have got nothing. I'm sorry, I'm going out of my limb here, but saying we are getting zilch support in terms of fiscal incentives. Yes, we need that support in terms of R&D. Startups also have the potential, because they are all EV companies, they have the potential to give that kind of adequate skilling to the new manpower that is being created, the young generation which is entering this space. And we are extremely willing to tie up with different state governments to make sure that the skilling reaches the people. We will be able to train them and then give them back to the system. So every company will be able to use the talent that goes on or is passed on to that person. So I completely agree with that point. And just adding one more thing, that we need all states, even from the center, we need some kind of incentives for the patent registrations that we are doing. Because yes, when we come up with new innovation, we have to spend a lot of money to secure that innovation. So just wanted to add to whatever Ntasha had pointed out.
No, very well said, Ashpreet, and thank you, Natasha, for those points there. Just adding up and complementing to what Dipti had also shared with us. So that actually takes us to our last leg as well, where we, as you just mentioned that, right now that, startups are probably not getting that push that they need. So PLI schemes actually talks about the need for policies. If we can understand, how is it likely that, the PLI schemes, once the thing, the umbrella is kind of widened and includes startup as well, how is it likely to boost the EV sector and generate more opportunities for growth? So, Ashpreet, you have actually kind of shared the hints of those, pointers with us, but if you can just elaborate more on it.
Actually, that's a great question, and I'm sure Dipti and Natasha both will agree. And I would just like to clarify something and use your platform to convey this, that startups are not included under PLI schemes even currently, and they won't be included in the future either. So we've had several conversations with government departments. They are very clear that it's the champion OEMs. I'm quoting them. This is even written in the policy that is the segment that they want to promote. 25,900 odd crore towards a scheme that has been given only to established players, and startups so far have been left out, because let's be real, no startup will have a global revenue of 10,000 crores and an investment in gross block of 3,000 crore. If any startup has garnered it, there are obviously backstories around it. So we need to be little more holistic in terms of when we are devising these schemes. I have worked on the other side, so I know how the government works, but coming on this side, the industry needs that kind of impetus in terms of getting this kind of funding. Imagine this kind of funding, 25,900 odd crore rupees getting distributed within the system with two smaller players as well who are trying to bring about some kind of innovation. While bigger players are coming out with their products, it is taking a while for them. The smaller players are already ready with their products, right? So we need that kind of push, and it was something that we had recommended to the government as well, but I guess it didn't really knock on their door and hear as yet. But for such schemes, I can see Dipti literally laughing. So
Because I read, Ashpreet, I read all those comments and feedbacks that had come. I was
Right.
helping Niti Aayog draft that policy.
Right.
So I can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, so just that point, that the basic eligibility for startups should be nil. It shouldn't be 10,000 crores. That's a lot of money. And for startups, if all those startups that have been registered in past 5 years from the date of the implementation of the policy, if they can also be included in it, it will really help the startup ecosystem. I'm not just representing EVage, I'm literally trying to talk on behalf of the industry, because the industry needs that kind of push, which is why, going back to Natasha's point, the plug and play situation will get corrected on its own the moment the government takes a step forward and tries to give that kind of financial incentives required. So I just wanted to highlight this under PLI.
Thanks, Ashpreet, for actually highlighting it, because India is anyway stressing and giving importance to startups a lot. We are generating, a comparatively good number of startups in India, and the economy is being driven by it. So of course, when the EV sector, when we talk about boosting it, so EV, startup would always play a crucial role there. Dipti, you had some things to share here.
Yes, I think I just wanted to point out a few things. I would let Niti Aayog and Morth defend what Ashpreet has pointed out, and I would not take that up. But yes, I think broadly, as is already reflected in that PLI scheme. Again, I don't want to talk more on what were the driving forces, why it has come out the way it has, because I must tell you that it took us almost like 2 hours to draft that policy and finalize the policy. Thankfully it is out there, it is helping in some manner. But a little bit of background, I think the PLI scheme largely was envisaging that larger players come in and they kind of set the floor. and which is why you will see that only the larger 10 players have been shortlisted for these subsidies, and it is obviously spread over multiple number of years basis milestones. And initially, of course, the batteries definition was different, and we changed it from lithium ion to ACC. Then we added niche batteries technologies. So all of those 18,000 plus 100 CR subsidy which will go out will be in phases, and yes, I understand the point that Ashpreet mentioned. I think yes, some of this or more aside can also be done for startups. That will definitely boost startups, and that will help innovation, and this should definitely be done. But as I mentioned, I think India wanted larger players to take the lead, so that there is no unsettlement while we traverse the journey. I think that was the broader idea, but I completely agree with what you mentioned, Ashpreet, and perhaps we should talk separately about how to handle that, and we can take it up to more than Niti Aayog.
So Ntasha, anything to add on there?
I'm good. I think there are a lot of cues for Dipti in the next discussion, which he has to put forth. So, but I think much required R&D support for startups is definitely should be highlighted somewhere, either with any of the Atal incubation or even any of the universities, to build some world-class research centers for this. It's much required.
True. Very well said. Thank you, Ashpreet, Ntasha, and Dipti for your thoughts and all those insights on the sector, and how is it, what are the issues and challenges that they are facing. Of course, I agree with what Dipti also says, that PLI scheme could be for setting up flow for the larger players, because somewhere consumers are more attached and related to the larger players. But yes, if having more specialized schemes for startups gives them the boost that's required and helps in R&D and improvising the whole technology in the EV sector, then why not? I'm sure the government must be considering it, and hopefully we should see something coming up in the future. So thank you, Ashpreet. Thank you, Ntasha and Dipti, for your time today. Thanks a lot for your inputs. Thank you.